Joining me now from London is Tomlinson, a policy director for the British Conservation Alliance, a pro-market environmental group, and who's also a political commentator with Young Voices UK. Connor, thanks for your time. The Prime Minister is what some have described as a Teflon man. Nothing seems to stick so far. So do you think Boris Johnson is going to survive this no-confidence vote?
Well, he's had a lot of charges in his prior journalism career of lying, etc., but that didn't seem to hamper his charisma on the way up, his ascension to the political hierarchy to being mayor, eventually MP and prime minister. He has had his fair share of blunders, be it running straight into a Japanese schoolchild while playing rugby, or his mishandling of the Russia scandal prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine quite a few years ago. However, it seems that this time Boris Johnson has caught himself in a bit of a sticky wicket when it comes to Partygate. He's been investigated for plenty, I believe it's up to 35 now, different separate incidents where lockdown rules were breached, and he is the first sitting Prime Minister to have technically broken the law. There's a bit of quibbling about whether or not the fixed penalty notices really count as a law breach, because it's kind of like a parking fine. They were only introduced fairly recently. However, the argument on principle is that he set the lockdown laws and he broke them. Whether or not you disagree with the laws like I did, he hasn't given a blanket amnesty to everyone else who broke them, so it seems there's one rule for the people in power and another rule for others. However, I am very sceptical as to whether or not this vote of no confidence will actually oust him. So far, we only have 19 people putting their names to the letters. That 54 does constitute a pretty sizable portion of the Conservative seat majority in the Parliament. They only have 73 seats, down 5 from their 2019 election victory. However, Theresa May actually survived hers in 2018, and she was in a fairly precarious position due to the instability of Brexit. People may grumble with Boris Johnson's handling the pandemic, I certainly do, but a lot of people still find him to be an election winner, and I think bar an uncharacteristic resignation on his own part tonight, I don't think the vote will be successful, and I think he'll remain.
Connor, you say that, but there does appear to be a disconnect between Downing Street, the Tory party, apparatchiks, and the British electorate. I mean, is it not the case that Boris Johnson now has a problem with being seen as somebody who is authentic and actually is somebody who believes in, or, is seen as a figure of integrity?
I'd agree with you. I think there's a bit of nuance in this conversation. There's actually 3 factions. There's the Labourite Lib Dem faction, even some Tory MPs belong to this, like Tobias Ellwood, who see the ousting of Boris Johnson as a sort of tactical, incremental step towards overturning Brexit, getting a Labour government in power, doing more socially progressive policies, etc. Then there's people like, I'm sure, myself and some of your viewers, who think Boris, on principle, has to go. He's broken the ministerial code, we don't like the lockdown rules, we think that someone more conservative, someone more honest should be in power. However, I will warn people that we do face a sort of, with our moral browbeating, which I agree with, we face to being in sort of a bubble, because there is a large portion of the country, when I've been on other networks, who have replied to me saying, oh, why are you just Boris bashing? He's the best we've got. There's no alternatives. The other parties are worse, etc. And so people might be discontented with his breaking of the rules, but there are some people who play politics like a team sport and don't see any other option. And so there are still going to be a pretty core constituency of people who are going to vote for him by default.
Connor, I think it would depend on which networks you've been on. I mean, obviously, if you talked about GB News, obviously that's a different sort of viewership to, say, perhaps something as ITN. However, with this in mind, if indeed this no confidence vote does succeed, who is likely to replace him?
I think Rishi Sunak has had his ship torpedoed by the largest tax burden since World War II in this country, the social care levies, the triple lock pensions, the terrible immediately negated scrap on fuel duty, etc., and the far-off promise of an income tax cut haven't really salvaged his political career, especially after it was revealed that his wife wasn't paying any tax either as a non-domicile citizen. So I don't think Rishi Sunak's lined up, and especially with the infighting between number 10 and number 11. I mean, don't forget, one of those Partygate photos came from the number 11 window. So I think Liz Truss was poised. She was the leader of the internal party polls over at Conservative Home of cabinet members. She was top of the runnings, whereas Boris Johnson was actually bottom. However, her sort of slapdash handling of the Ukraine crisis might be a bit of a problem. Jeremy Hunt's definitely making attempts, but Nadine Dorries within the last hour has stuck the knife in his back and said, oh, you were on the side of China when it came to the very harsh lockdown policy, so he's not going anywhere. My prediction is Nadim Zahawi. He's going to have some popularity from the vaccine procurement scheme, some unpopularity with that, also some unpopularity and popularity considering his education reforms. He's currently sitting education minister. But I think the Tory party, particularly as they want to open up their voting base to various demographics and seem just as socially progressive as Labour these days, I think seizing upon Nadim Zahawi's story as a young immigrant who came to the country not even able to speak English and then able to ascend to the cabinet is a story that is going to be something you can make electoral capital with.
Connor Tomlinson, thank you so much. Joining me now